There we go. Okay, so Threading Change aims to work at the intersections of consumer education and industry transformation and education, also research and policy, so our tri-impact model. To us, we know the problems in the fashion industry don't work in silos, and neither should the solutions. So right now you are attending one out of our three many areas, which is the education piece of our international webinar series, Textile Talks. We have our season 2 webinars coming up in January that will be all talking about fashion and climate. And this one's more about fashion and intersectionality. We also work on our global innovation story map, where we're collecting stories and also data from global ethical innovation brands to drive more transparency, innovation, and also education. And lastly, we also do research and policy, such as through our Garment Worker Visibility Project, which is helping to raise the voice of garment workers in heavily affected regions because we are an equity-based organization. And this is also just a reminder that we are doing, oh, I'm not sure where those lines came from, but sorry about that. We're doing an Instagram contest over on social media, which has to do with talking yesterday about how the US election really affects small businesses and fashion brands in the United States and what that means for the circular economy. So if you're interested in entering and also winning 2 sets of cashmere gloves and scarves, you can go to bit.ly/tcbbsheep and all the information will be there.
Awesome. Thank you, Sophia. I also wrote down the contest link in the chat in case you're interested. And we're joined by 3 incredible panelists today who are global change makers in the apparel industry, all affecting various stages of the cycle of production. Starting off, I would like to introduce Renil Vitarana, who is the Chief Innovation Officer and Chief Technology Officer of Twinery Innovation by Mass, one of the largest apparel manufacturers in South Asia. Renil, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Maybe if you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so just to give a little brief of myself, although I'm in the textile industry, I'm an electronics engineer by education. And right now I work at a company called MAS, which is, as Fernanda mentioned, the largest apparel manufacturer in South Asia. We also operate in about 16 countries globally, and we employ roughly about 100,000 people. MAS has always been different from our inception, and primarily because Sri Lanka is not a powerhouse when it comes to to industry as it were, and for us to make a difference in the world, we had to find our own niche, and that was primarily by being more innovative, coming up with better solutions, niche areas, etc. So right now we are probably one of the world's largest manufacturers of lingerie as well as sportswear. So some of our noted customers would be like Victoria's Secrets, Adobe, and Nike, Lululemon, etc. Why I joined the apparel industry was as an electronic engineer. There wasn't many jobs in Sri Lanka, and apparel industry was really, booming at the time. Also, when I sort of looked at it, everyone seemed to have their own job. So you were either a fabric manufacturer, garment manufacturer, buyer, or something like that. And I felt that there was not enough people who knew a lot about the industry from start to finish. So I made it a point to work in different areas to get a full flavor of the entire industry, from buying offices and manufacturing, textile manufacturing, etc. And so that really helped me in 2 ways. One was to bring this holistic view, and as a result, when I'm developing or looking at developing technologies and solutions, they're always relevant and they sort of tick the boxes for everyone down the chain. So my objective in life, I would say, is to optimize the industry as a whole, as opposed to optimizing one area or the other. If you get to the next slide. Thank you. So if you look at the whole chain, what you find is there's this whole design area, development, then you have yarn manufacturing, fabric manufacturing, garment manufacturing, and that whole chain. And what you find is as we've moved away from, having your tailor in your village making the product that you wanted, to sort of having factories that were sort of mass producing, what happened was each of these industries optimized themselves. So the yarn manufacturer said, I need to manufacture 50,000 kilos of yarn in one go, otherwise I won't be able to give it at this price. Fabric guy said, I need to produce it in thousands and thousands of kilos. The garment guy was like, I need to make 5,000 garments at a time. The shipper said it had to be a 40-foot container, and so on and so forth. So that whole chain, each one of these areas were optimized, but the chain in itself is completely sub-optimized. And it takes roughly about 2 years from a sort of initial ideation to something getting into the hands of the consumer. And so that's where we believe that there's a lot of opportunity to rationalize this, to improve this. And the main reasons is, if you flip to the next slide, please, is that this industry is highly intensive when it comes to material. The amount of material that we waste after making a garment, like I said, it takes a lot of time to get from an idea all the way through till a product getting to the hands of a consumer. And as you can imagine, what I think is going to be important in 2 years' time can be very, very different, right, from when it actually gets there. So as a result, what also happens is that you have a lot of waste that takes place. So you bring stuff in, you can't sell it, it doesn't sell at full price. So you start dumping all this product at cut prices. People buy more than they need. They can't store it, so then it becomes waste. So there's a whole part of that as well. And then on the other side, there's massive labor usage. And you can look at it as a good thing or a bad thing, but I think in general, if you use too much of anything, then it's not necessarily good for the balance of the world. So that sort of I think brings me together in terms of what my passion is and how I want to solve this problem, and I'm very happy to be part of this panel. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ranil. I'm seeing some green lines on the presentation, so I'm just gonna stop sharing and then re-share. I don't know why that was happening. Apologies. Let's try that again. Does everybody see the slides without the green lines?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, amazing. Okay, so next I am very proud to introduce Karan. So Karan is the South Asia Program Manager from Fashion for Good, which is a global innovation platform for sustainable innovation, and they're leaders in the fashion innovation space. We're so excited that Karan can join us today. So on to you, Karan.
Thank you so much. So hi everyone, I'm Karan. As mentioned, I'm a program manager with the South Asia Innovation Program at Fashion for Good. I look after sort of accelerator programming, investor relations, and sort of the overall day-to-day portfolio company support. Before Fashion for Good, I was with Social Business. I was kind of involved in building these mission-driven ventures within companies, and also to develop these projects between companies and startups that were committed to social impact. But I think that was sort of like very, very briefly about me, because I'm going to kind of go ahead and tell you a bit about what we do at Fashion for Good. So you can go to the next slide. So Fashion for Good is a global initiative to make all fashion good. We started in 2017 with the CNA Foundation, now the Loudest Foundation, as a founding partner, and have several corporate and affiliate partners now on board. And go to the next slide. And there are two real parts to Fashion for Good. The innovation platform that you see on the left that houses our scaling programs, the South Asia Innovation Program, and the Good Fashion Fund. And this is where we focus on connecting innovations with industry players in order to sort of drive that commercial adoption. And on the right, you see our role as a convener for change, where we have the Fashion for Good experience, the world's first museum dedicated to sustainable fashion, as well as the circular apparel community, sort of a co-working space in Amsterdam that we share with other like-minded organizations like the Sustainable Apparel Coalition and CTHC. Go to next slide. And the idea really is, I would say, to propel an industry forward in sort of its circular transition. And the way we do this is by bringing the world's largest brands, retailers, supply chain partners in this joint ambition. For example, Adidas, Chanel, PVH, Arvind, Wellspun, to kind of name a few. And next slide. And over the past 3 years, we've kind of supported over 110 companies in our accelerator and scaling programs, where we focus on enabling these opportunities with our 20 corporate partners and really drive those solutions to scale. We've unlocked about 120 million in capital commitments for these enterprises. And really, in terms of who we bring into our programs, this is on the next slide, we kind of look at innovation all across the textile value chain, right? From startups working on new raw materials and wet processing, all the way to retail and use, and even sort of more overarching solutions like packaging, logistics, wastewater treatment. But yeah, so I think that was kind of a brief overview. I would say thanks so much for having me, and really looking forward to today's conversation as well.
Super. Thank you so much, Karan. Really, really cool information to hear. I'm very pleased to introduce our next panelist, Irina McKenzie. She is the founder of FabCycle in Vancouver. And Irina has very powerfully brought the message of textile waste into the masses into Metro Vancouver. So on to Irina.
Thank you, Sophia. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, so nice to meet you. We're based in Vancouver in BC in Canada. And I wanted to introduce you to FabCycle and the work we've been doing here locally with apparel manufacturers in our community, and also share with you a couple other projects we've been working on locally. So I think the biggest impact right now we're having with FabCycle is our textile waste reuse center. So actually, I'll go back a little bit. So FabCycle started a couple of years ago as a collection service of textile waste, and we work directly with apparel manufacturers in Metro Vancouver to collect their textile waste, like scraps, offcuts, things like that. So we work there specifically with pre-consumer textile waste, which is materials that don't reach the consumer. So we don't work with clothing and finished items, and we collect their textile waste to get it either reused or recycled. And our second arm, so to speak, that we connect is we collect materials that are they're not going to get recycled, they're going to go for reuse, and we take them to our Textile Waste Reuse Center, which is a community space where we bring community together to get them inspired, to get them use the existing materials we currently have in our region. We are very, very small, but it's been absolutely incredible and overwhelming to see what kind of materials we are able to collect and how we can actually connect to our community, and what is the strong messaging we can actually bring through physical objects, through the conversations around textiles, around making, around creating, around just connecting around that. And so I have a little small video just to show you our Textile Waste Reuse Center that is based in Vancouver. It's just a really quick introduction. It's actually changed quite a lot, but just to give you an idea, and again, we're very, very small, so the space is about 1,000 square feet, and you can even see all of it. But just to give you an idea, Sophia, would you mind playing it? Mm-hmm. So everything you see in this space is textile waste. It's all materials we've collected from our local industry, just local industry, not even outside of it. It's all brand new materials that are considered to be textile waste, and they're just like one step before they were reaching to the landfill. And as you can see, this is not garbage. Well, these are the stuff that you see right now. Those are the scraps we actually usually collect from the apparel manufacturers, and we try still to sort them and see who can use them, because as part of circularity, we're trying to find that gap and bridge between what is considered to be waste and change the mindset to have a narrative that waste is actually a resource. And so that's one of the projects. The other two projects I'm involved in is a nonprofit called Framework Education Society, and we've been running community repair events or clothing fix-its since 2015. We've been running those events in libraries and community centers, and they're specifically targeted for consumers and not people that make necessarily, to teach them more, to have those mending skills, to be able to repair things, to be able to sew a button or repair a zipper, things like that. And we also have another project called Vancouver Sustainable Fashion Designers, which is more targeted towards our local industry, specifically towards the micro businesses that are working in Vancouver and they're sustainable and in the apparel industry, and connect people to each other. So our biggest emphasis with all those projects is community and getting people together and connecting and talking and supporting one another. And it's all done through textile waste. So if you are in Vancouver, please come to our website, just check out what's happening there. If you're not local, please reach out. We love talking textile waste. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Irina. And thank you so much, all the other incredible panelists. We're so excited to have you here. And now we're going to my favorite part. We're going to go to the panel discussion. So we're going to go to a Q&A, and to all our audience, feel free to write down any questions you have on the chat box, and we'll be monitoring it. Okay. Next slide, please. Perfect. So question 1. What are some of the innovative technologies your organization is doing that is unique in the industry, and how are they scalable? I would like to ask that first to Renelle, please.
Shouldn't have asked me this question because it's my passion and I might end up talking for a long time. Primarily, we've sort of been working on this for about 7 or 10 years now, in terms of trying to find technologies that, like I said, shorten the whole lead time, but with it also takes away a lot of the waste that happens. So textile recycling is one area that we've been working on in trying to come up with ways that we can recycle. Other areas that we're working on is the use of natural dyes to replace chemical dyes, as it were. We've been working with people who have developed dyes from the tea industry. Of course, Sri Lanka is very well known for our tea. And we've also brought in a technology, you put a lot of prints or chemicals, softeners, various things like that on textiles. And so we've developed technology that allows us to do that in a chemical-free, water-free sort of environment. And our first product is called Dry Vantage, which is how we put waterproofing or hydrophobicity to garments with what we call C0 technologies, using zero water. We've also looked at using ocean plastics, and we actually developed a whole range of products. The Sri Lanka cricket team, who is sponsored the clothing at the last World Cup, were wearing the products made out of ocean plastics. We also have technologies around waste-free manufacturing. So like I said, when you make a garment, there's a lot of offcuts, like Irina showed. And so we're looking at technologies like flat knit, etc., where you make the garment just with the amount of material that you need. We've also developed technologies that you print, again, only the area that you need, and that also without using any kind of water. So like I said, waterless dyeing and waterless printing are areas that we are working on. These are still early stage. There's a lot of investment that needs to go in to make them real and mainstream. So that's one of the areas that, where we have this problem of coming up with innovating something and then taking it to scale. The other area that we work on is circularity, and circularity, more than a technology innovation, is more like a process innovation. As you know, a lot of our clothes are blended materials, so you have one or more different fabrics or material types that go into it, say polyester, cotton, etc. And so that's an area that we are working on. How do we change that entire business model? There's a lot more I can say, but I think I'm out of time, so I'm going to stop now and let Karan take on from here.
Thank you. That was perfect timing. Go ahead, Karan, please.
Okay. So I mean, we kind of look at innovations all across the supply chain and kind of base that on in terms of priorities for partners and how we want to kind of bring them in and how they would kind of work to develop a product during our program. But so I'm just going to spotlight a few that are really interesting. One sort of exciting innovation in the cotton space is Galley. They're a startup that works to kind of produce lab-grown cotton, and they develop cotton fiber directly through the propagation of cells, right? And what this does is remove all of these like traditional steps of cotton plantations and all negative impacts sort of tied to that stage of processing, like on the biodiversity lens, or whether in terms of using considerably less water, less pesticides. And they're really developing a solution that's really more resource efficient than conventional cotton, but can be also grown sort of 10 times faster. So that's really very exciting. I think you did mention scalable, so I have the same thing what Ranil mentioned in the sense that they are early stage. There's going to be a lot that goes into what needs to develop these innovations further. One that I can talk about is sort of more ready to scale would be something like AltMat. And they really bring in innovation at the fiber production level, right? To make textile grade fiber from agri-waste material. So not plants grown for textiles with the kind of feel and quality you'd expect from that, but agri-waste from say like food crops. And they definitely work a lot with hemp at the moment. It's something that their first product, but there's potential for something like this to kind of be scaled to other feedstock, banana, pineal, flax, little plants, right? And kind of make that more and of better quality than they're able to be used at today. And that's kind of what's the exciting part about it. So, I mean, there are a bunch of these. In our current batch, you have like one, at least for South Asia, you have one kind of making mycelium-based leather alternative. That's really exciting, using waste flowers as a feedstock. There's one, like, because Ronald mentioned dyeing, there's a company called KB Calls making sustainable dyes from from microbes, and they kind of extract the dye pigment from there. And that sort of reduces the whole agri side of things again. But yeah, so I think I just wanted to kind of cover a few of those. We have all of them up on our website if you'd ever like to take a look. But yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Karan. Joanna, would you like to ask the next question?
Yes, so the next question that we have is for Irina, and we were wondering if you could discuss, do you believe that the apparel industry can play a lead role in textile waste, diversion, and emissions, and how can we inspire other industries to follow?
Yes. So the reason I'm giggling a little bit is because textile waste is one of the largest waste streams because the industry is so enormous, and it's not just apparel. There is a lot of textile use in different other industries like agricultural and automotive and so on and so on. And even within textile waste, there's apparel waste and there's upholstery and so on and so on. So yes, absolutely, innovations has been driven by the textile industry and by the apparel industry and so on because they're so large. It's not nothing new. I think Karen, you mentioned Sustainable Apparel Coalition. I think that was just founded by a lot of like larger companies, for example, that just were leading change, and we're trying to do a lot of different activities to promote change. There's also, sorry, I'm just getting distracted. I think one of the largest challenges, it's like Renee and Karen were saying, is the commercialization stage. We have a lot of wonderful innovations that are happening with different stages in the process, particularly with textile waste and recycling. There's the process itself is extremely complex for various reasons. Among the reasons, like Renee mentioned, is the blends. And there are innovations happening in place, but the challenge is to get it commercialized and get it to scale and get it to be able to use it. And so we're definitely getting towards that. And I feel personally that there's been actually quite a lot of strides been happening in the last 5 years, more than last 15 years or so, just because for various reasons. There's one reason, big one, is awareness. There's a lot of consumer awareness to sustainability, and the demand coming from consumers for more transparency, more sustainable options, more accountability from companies. So companies and brands are starting to create the funds and create the space to be able to talk about those things, to be able to show some innovations and progress with getting towards sustainability and talking about more circular economy, creating different structures and procedures where they can be able to be aligned better for that. And the other question is, how can we inspire other industries to follow? Well, a lot of other industries are already dealing with waste, with their own industries. Every industry has its own waste. Every industry is working within the model. I think we're all living right now in a linear economy, right? So if we really talk about larger scope of things, and we're all living in a linear economy, there's always going to be within the take, make, the dispose part. And so with every industry, there are innovations happening in place. Some of them more, some of them less. We're talking about big industries, so we're talking about large economic shifts that are happening, especially in the current climate was happening, not just in light of environmental climate change, but also political change, also the world pandemic. That's another big thing we have to consider. So how can we inspire? I think it's not about just inspiring, it's about learning from each other and also collaborating with other industries and seeing who made progress, how, and so on, and how can we adapt, and can we connect, and can we talk about it. So I would say that's kind of intertwined more than anything.
Awesome, thank you so much. Those are such good points, and people in the audience agree as well. So the following question is for Renil and Irina again. What are some of the challenges to achieve a transparent circular model in the apparel industry? Renil, it's your turn.
Thank you. So I'll break it into probably 3 areas. I think the main one is probably around transparency. And I think the fact that the industry is so fragmented, I don't know the actual numbers, but I mean, the number of manufacturers, the number of retailers, and all the way down the line, this sort of, that level of fragmentation means that we find it very difficult to get the kind of transparency that you would like. And so for that, to implement something is cost prohibitive. To have that level of data being gathered at every one of these units around, where does my material come from, who makes my product, etc., is going to be a fairly a large endeavor. Similarly, I think the fact that we are fragmented also allows smaller brands, for instance, to come in and make that a differentiator in their business model. The second one I would say is logistics, and more importantly, reverse logistics in being able to collect used product and send it back to where it came from, or even in that country itself, to treat it and make it reusable. And so there are various examples of people offering inducements, like Apple allowing you to return your old phone when you're getting a new one, and then they'll see how much of the materials in that old phone can be reused, etc. The third one would be regulations and policies. And then one of the big things around this is, I would say, the anti-dumping laws that have come into place justly, because you found that, certain countries, developed countries, were dumping their waste in third world countries. And in order to stop that through the Basel Convention, they came up with banning that, and so that also stands in the way of being able to move this product back. So I think there is, if you wanted to make it truly circular, I think there's a lot of things that needs to be unlocked for it to work. Thank you.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think it starts with starting with definitions. If we have a question, the question here is the challenges to achieve transparent circular model in apparel industry. So I would first ask, like, let's define all those things. Like, what are the challenges? And then what is the definition of transparent? Then what is the definition of circular economy? And then who are the players in the apparel industry? So I sometimes see it as like the challenges could be maybe outlined if, let's say you live in a building of 4 floors and you want to achieve transparent and circular model within your building. So start mapping just like the players and just who lives in the building. What are the challenges at all? How do you achieve transparency and circularity within the building you live in? And then once we kind of backtrack and understand like who is in the building, what are the challenges, then we can start seeing, like Renil said, reverse engineer it. What are the challenges to achieve that? It's actually very, very difficult because there's different logistical barriers, there's different ecosystems which everybody lives in, there's different motivations, there's different incentives, there's different values to bridge. There's some really serious technological challenges and monetary challenges with different various. So it's a very, very complex question, but if you even look at like in like a small scope of things, how to achieve transparency and circularity, you kind of start seeing the difficulties why this can be implemented on a larger scale. So the challenges are I think they're vast, of course. They're vast, and it's an ongoing process, and it all comes down to, I think, understanding definitions, and agreeing on definitions, agreeing on set terms, like what is transparency, circularity, like how far do you want to go circular? You know, are you like in terms of repair on those circularity, and are those on all stages of the life cycle, or are you talking about only several stages? Does that cut for it to be circular or not? Also, apparel industry. Are you part of the apparel industry, or maybe you're also part of another industry? If that makes sense, like those are the challenges. There's just a lot to take into consideration, and it's very complex. And so I think that's why there's a lot of stakeholders involved in supporting organizations that are in the apparel industry to move towards the circular economy, because there's quite a lot of mindset shifts and processes shifts and economical shifts that need to happen to move to more circular models that are more ideal.
Fantastic. Thank you, Irina. That is, and Renil, that is a very complex conversation to have with no shortage of different areas to work within. So thanks for that conversation. The next question we're going to move over to is with Karan. And for that one, we would like you to please discuss, how do you manage collaboration across competitive supply chain?
Right, thank you. So I mean, we kind of see sustainability as really a pre-competitive space. And what that involves multiple stakeholders that kind of share a common problem, and saying they kind of need to develop a solution that they can then all benefit from, right? But obviously not as easy as it sounds. And this type of collaboration is not new to, say, like the pharmaceutical industry or like the wider life sciences space, right? But even there, it sort of comes from this realization that many of these major obstacles that have to be overcome are just too large to kind of do it alone, right? An example of how we can do this is with a project that was recently launched, the Full Circle's Textile project, which is this kind of this multi-stakeholder consortium involving Fashion for Good, Kering, BVH, Target, the Loudest Foundation, and Birla Cellulose. And for this particular project, the real challenge we were looking at is textile recycling. This is something Irina mentioned, right? The beginning, it's really challenging. And you do have mechanical recycling options, which definitely works, but like there's sort of significant drawbacks to that, in saying like the need for a high purity feedstock, or say like the strength of the fibers that you get at the end of it. And chemical recycling, the alternative, is really able to address many of these shortcomings. But a lot of the technology and offerings are still very small scale. lack of financing, things like that, right? So over kind of the next 18 months, it was just recently launched, we're going to be evaluating like these 5 innovators, Evernew, the Infinited Fiber Company, Phoenix, Renew Cell, and Titan Biosciences. They kind of do this, and they'll be focusing on man-made cellulosic fibers like viscose, rayon, and the kind of content that these startups will produce. So be converted to fiber together with the partners, and then from there kind of move from fiber all the way to garment. And the results of something like this can probably give us a lot more information and how best these innovations scale, how the like what are those key barriers to like helping them grow more. And like I think it's really attractive to have these kind of coalitions and this kind of collaboration, because it really gives you the opportunity to use that data and understanding to move an entire industry forward. So I think that's kind of the view for me. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Karan. Now going to the next question, I'll ask that to Renil again. Why are government regulations and policies so instrumental in the innovation and waste diversion space?
So, so I'm not sure whether everyone is going to agree with my point of view here, but I think there's 2 aspects for it. There is government policies generally help things get sort of done. They sort of put deadlines and make sure that things get done before that. However, like we've been discussing here, there are lots of unlocks that are needed in order for us to make this kind of monumental shifts in our industry that we want to do. And again, because the industry is so fragmented, it's very difficult to the kind of investment that is needed in order to firstly to invent ways of solving for these, and secondly to make sure that those can be put in the kind of scale that's going to have an impact, is massive. I mean, you're talking about an industry that's more than $1 trillion, and if you want to change it across multiple brands, multiple product categories, then driving down to multiple manufacturers across multiple countries, and these are also all in different places in economic development. So you can get a country like Burkina Faso all the way through to the US cotton industry, for instance. So you don't want to kill the industry in one area and make it happen in thrive in one area. So therefore, I think there is the role that government can play firstly is to make sure that they put the right kind of money in the right kind of places to help develop affordable solutions. And then once those solutions have been developed, then sequentially, for instance, sequentially start putting some deadlines in place where certain regulations start coming into place. So therefore, I think it's in general, it's not a we'll say a overnight process. It would be a 10 to 20 year kind of time frame, in my opinion, around how we need to go, implement this in its totality. And initiatives like the European Green Deal, where they want to be climate neutral by 2050, that kind of initiative is really great if then we can also back it up with the kind of technology, the investment, and things like that that are needed in order to make that a reality. So conclusion would be government regulation is important, but I think policy is probably going to be more important.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Renil. Our next question, we are going to go back to Irina, and that one is about how to raise consumer awareness around the importance of sustainability, innovation, and circular economy in the fashion industry.
Thank you, Sophia. It's a good question, but I like to break down the questions and really understand what actually you're asking. What I mean by that is that how to raise consumer awareness, it's a really broad question. I think the question a bit more focus would be by whom? Who needs to raise consumer awareness and why? So if I go back to who needs to raise consumer awareness, it's and how to do that as well. Sorry, I'll go back. If we know who wants to raise consumer awareness, it'll be easier to see how to do that. So for example, in our region in Vancouver, we have a body called Metro Vancouver, which is a political body of 22, I think, municipalities in our area that is in charge for different campaigns around sustainability and different awareness and so on. And so they created an awareness campaign to help residents in Metro Vancouver to learn, understand better what are the options to divert textile waste, and especially they were focusing clothing. So they created a campaign called Think Thrice, which is to repair, reduce, and reuse, to encourage people to not throw clothing in the landfill, but donate it instead. And the reason for that was because they did a research and they found out that there's too large of a percentage of clothing that goes in the landfills in Metro Vancouver, because there's audits happening in landfills. And one of the reasons for that is because there's not enough awareness of what are the options, what to do with clothing waste, for example. So people think that they can just dump things in the garbage instead of being able to donate it and try to see if they can circulate that a little bit more. And so they created this awareness campaign. And so I think this is for an example of how to raise awareness for the importance of more sustainability and more circularity and more options, that is done by a political body of basically municipalities, that is done and has like a larger impact because they have the funding, they have the audience, there's billboards, there's promotions happening around that. So it does create a lot of awareness. Another organization is like your organization, Threading Change. So what you're doing right now is raising awareness. So all you, the participants that are part of this, you're participating in this, and I hope you are getting something hopefully insightful in one of our conversations. But the fact that you know about it, you'll create a ripple effect, because this will impact the way you think about things and the way you make decisions. And you have your own bubbles in your own communities where you're going to be talking about things, and this might cause a ripple effect to raise more. So there's, of course, on a community level, but I think in terms of awareness, there's also like they're talking about like, you know, like sort of like reverse pyramids. Where does it come from? Does it come from policymakers, or does it come from the community, the audience? And where are the companies in that reverse pyramid, and who does the awareness? How to do that? There's various ways to do that. A lot of it is marketing, because marketing is a tool used to convey messages, and a lot of it's branding and so on, and things that are done. So there's different ways to do that. I think the question is, who is going to do that, and why as well, and ask the questions from there.
Thank you so much, Irina. Sorry, that's Joanna. Go ahead.
That's okay. Yeah, that's not a small question with not a small answer, Irina. And the next one is definitely also not a small question with not a small answer. And we're going to keep Irina in this conversation and invite Corinne to come in as well. And we're wondering, what recent developments give you hope for the future of the fashion industry?
Yeah, again, very big questions. But sort of, so I think one was sort of like our expansion to Asia, in the sense that it was really built on an understanding of how important it is to include other supply chain partners, and really this whole region where a lot of this textile manufacturing is centered, when trying to enable sort of a circular transition. And the entire experience so far, sort of bringing new innovators together, the response of investors in the region, and really like the startup ecosystem here has kind of been really exciting. We recently released a report with the Circular Apparel Innovation Factory in India on identifying sort of promising areas of innovation within fashion tech. And obviously the process was long. It took almost a year on developing sort of case studies and landscaping where these innovators were in the space across universities, across the broad different areas. And I think the findings were sort of really promising around, say, like wear and dry processing, right? Where there's sort of a lot of these really disruptive technologies that can be scaled around bottleless dyeing, low impact pre-treatment, finishing processes, and even sort of raw materials, right? When there's so many of these companies dedicated to finding natural fiber alternatives to cotton. And I think, I mean, to kind of answer the question, I think what really gives me hope is that we're just getting started, right? I mean, there's so much of this that is really dynamic, and so much left to be done, that sort of that's kind of what makes everything exciting and sort of gives us like a day-to-day and like why we're here kind of thing. But yeah, so I think that's it for me. Back to Irina.
Thank you, Karan. I wanted to answer this in two ways. One is the hope and developments happening in textile waste, because that's my industry. That's what I'm really, really passionate about and really interested about. I think one of the things I'm really interested and I'm really excited to see more of is what Karan was saying earlier about all the innovations that are happening in in fiber innovation and process innovation, with like mycelium and different cellulosic fibers that are happening with pineapple leather and mushroom leather, mycelium, like I said, and there's wine leather, and there's all kinds of stuff. And I think it's really, really interesting, really exciting. And although it's not really directly to textile waste, what I think is interesting that signifies that there is a lot more funding and a lot more interest in innovations that are happening in the apparel industry, which trickles down to things like manufacturing innovation, textile waste innovation, and other processes innovation. And of course, it's pushing us towards sustainability, because all those changes are happening, and it's fantastic. The other big thing is happening, and I don't know about hope, but I'm a bit on a fence on that one, but things are happening. So, and what I'm referring to is what's happening right now is the pandemic. In the last, 2020, basically, the way the world froze and our economic basically froze in various layers, exposed the vulnerability of our industry. And like Ranil was saying, we're all completely fragmented, and that created so much weaknesses that we revealed. And what I'm talking about is how long it takes to develop materials, like where are all the players within the life cycle of this product production, innovation, and manufacturing, for example. How are we even like selling our products? The model of brick and mortar versus e-commerce versus rental models versus other innovative business models. So I think what's happening right now, and of course what's happening with elections in the U.S. and what's happening with different changes in our export and import, what is happening here with all different trade agreements and so on, that's really shifting our apparel industry in a larger scale, and it's completely changing the current landscape of what is happening. I don't know what is going to happen, but what I do know is that things are changing, and we are seeing all the vulnerabilities of really, really old, not old, but very established organizations in the apparel industry. And we're seeing that things are shifting, things are changing. And I think from that will come a lot more innovation and a lot more push towards sustainability and transparency and accountability, because it's out there, and we live in a world of information and information sharing and social media. And so because of that, it's pushing towards that transparency, and that push towards sharing a lot more information with consumers, and hopefully getting things better.
Thank you so much, Irina. Now if we could go to the next slide, please, for a very last question, that would be amazing. So this one is for Karan and Ranil. What is your advice for smaller brands, and why should they invest in circular, innovative, sustainable practices? Karan?
Yeah. So for this, I think like the first thing would be that it's never really just impact. It's about like leveraging your resources more responsibly, kind of allowing brands to future-proof their business models. And the challenges really, like everyone sort of talked about today, is not a lack of disruptive ideas, but really a need to accelerate the pace of that change and the capital that's needed to unlock that. And I think the understanding is really based on that the current processes, current products, existing solutions are really not going to bring progress quickly enough in that transition. And we released a report at Davos this year together with the Boston Consulting Group that kind of looked at this. And what we saw is that in order to sort of achieve a step change in sustainability through innovation by 2030, so essentially like in line with the Sustainable Development Goals and those commitments, the fashion industry needs 20 to 30 billion of financing per year to commercialize those solutions. And this is an industry that's contributing to, say, 2.5 to the global GDP, and has like this disproportionately large environmental and social impact. And like if you look at sort of current share of global emissions, like between sort of 7 to 10%, or like industrial water pollution, which is at nearly 20%. It's sort of very obvious that the fashion industry has this immense opportunity to make like an outsized contribution to the SDGs. And especially, targeting, say, like clean energy, clean water, sanitation. And accordingly, the 60% of that amount I mentioned, like the 20, 30 billion, is really for these sectors. I think that's kind of where we know that the fashion industry can play like a much bigger role in reaching those commitments for 2030. But yes, I think over to Ranil.
Thanks, Karen. I'm going to take completely different we'll say a completely different view of this, primarily because it makes business sense. If you look at the generations that are coming in now, in the millennials, etc., Gen Zs, they are much more concerned about the environment, and their buying habits are also different. They buy less and they own less because they are primarily much more mobile, and therefore they hold fewer number of pieces as compared to the past. However, what they do is that each piece that they buy, they would like it to be something that they can talk about, something that resonates with their values, etc. And so therefore, historically, where people used to just buy cheap things, and a lot of it now you find that they are buying niche product, and they are also more suspicious of large brands and the negative impact that those brands have on the whole world. And so right now, I think the time is really ripe for anyone who wants to go and start a business that has some meaning to it, that also helps people to look at their values and manage those in how they purchase. So now is the time that if you have in any kind of sustainability, whether you're looking at fair wages, whether you're looking at circularity, whether you're looking at impact to the environment, things like that, I think there's a lot of opportunity to start a business and then grow in that area. And the main thing now is, I don't think everyone who starts a business wants to be a billionaire. You're doing it because it's your passion and you want to really get into it, and also have a sense of achievement which is not purely monetary. And I think this is a nice area now, and a nice opportunity, and the timing is right to get into this kind of business.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ranil. And what a great end off there. I really resonate with what you and Karan both said. Part of the reason why we were inspired to start Threading Change is because we were young consumers that were very disenfranchised by the lack of discussion about ethical fashion and also how consumers and youth play a big role at the global fashion space. After some of us attended the UN Climate Change Conference and saw that all the people that had to say were large industry brands, sometimes those doing the most polluting. So we're really inspired also, as Rena mentioned, to start this conversation to help drive that consumer awareness. But as we mentioned, that's also just one part of the equation. It also comes with research, policy, and engagement with other innovators. And I see some folks here today that I know are owners of small businesses and also small fashion brands. So thank you so much for all the great insight you three have provided. I'm sure it was very helpful to all of our audience members. So we are now at the 9:03 Pacific Standard Time mark, and we do have one audience question. I think we will ask it, but just to keep it short. And then for any other questions, feel free to stay on for the optional Q&A period. This question comes from Sangya, and she says, where do you think the innovation lies in including workers and artisans from the informal economy? How can we boost their participation in the global value chain? And this is for any of the panelists.
I can go first if you'd like. So very interesting. I think we've also been looking at, how do we change how this industry is run. Right now, you're taking primarily a lot of mothers away from their children, away from their homes, and bringing them to factories to manufacture. And so we've been thinking, is there a way that we can, really upend that and make it a much more inclusive sort of model that allows a person to take on the responsibilities that they have towards their families, to their loved ones, etc., and to society in general, while still having a means of, having a good income and doing something. So, and we've said, okay, how do we maybe put more onus, allow them to work from home and do it at the time that's convenient for them, a much more sort of tailored product, and what can we do and what technology can we provide that allows that connection to happen between the consumer and the maker, and so digitally, how do you connect the two? How do you allow things like the measurements of the person who's buying it, the what they want? How do you get back reflected in that product that they make? And so I think technology will be a big unlock that will allow us to do it. And again, if any entrepreneurs are there, I think it's something that, a model of working that I think will resonate going forward. And in maybe, I don't know, hopefully in the next 10 to 20 years, you will stop seeing these gigafactories and see much more artisanship coming through in apparel.
Amazing. Irina, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, sorry. I was trying to find the question, the full question again. Is it the connection for artisans to?
Yes.
To.
I'll just.
What is the question again? Sorry.
I'll just repost in the chat, but they're essentially asking where innovation lies to include workers and artisans from the informal economy. So how can we boost their participation in global value chain?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a tricky question because there's a subtlety that lies within the magic that exists within the community and within artisanship and craftsmanship, and that subtlety where it kind of shifts into large scale manufacturing and may lose that artisanship and the community sense. So I think it really lies within each community to decide what is the best way to do so. And what I'm talking about specifically is because we work with our own communities locally, and there's and we respect very much craftsmanship and artisanship and the different traditional craft ways of making textiles, for example. And so I'm just very wary about losing that when it goes to larger manufacturing, just because I think it's a bit tricky. So how to bridge that, I think it really depends on the community and what they're wanting to get to. Like if they're wanting to, for example, collaborate with other organizations and create a relationship with them, to depends what it is, if it's whether it's for producing materials or if it's either to sharing their skills, maybe licensing their the ways they've been doing things, or is it just like purely just selling what they manufacture? It's a bit of a tricky question for me to answer, to be honest, because I'm very wary of that transition between artisanship and craftsmanship to larger scaling, and how that's might be used in other countries, for example, in other forms, when it's out there. And I'm talking about also things like could be kind of gray zone of like cultural appropriation and things like that. So that's why I'm very wary about this question particularly. And I would love to be able to focus on exactly what is actually asked, because it's a bit too broad for me to answer properly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no worries. I know, Irina, you're staying on for the Q&A period after, so we can definitely dive deeper into the question. Karan, did you have anything to add about how to embed more local artisans within the global value chain and how innovation can work there?
Yeah, so I mean, like Irina mentioned, is really very broad, but I'd also kind of like to touch on what Ranil mentioned around solutions with traceability, to kind of say, right from beginning to end, for a customer to have visibility on who made, like basically who made my clothes. But I think there's also a lot of discussion around sort of the brand relationship with the artisans, and sort of the nature of that equitable relationship and the ownership of the design, which is kind of like a different thing I won't be touching on. But we also kind of looking at innovations that say have education for garment workers along the supply chain. For example, there was this one incubated by the Good Business Lab called Vovo, and they kind of did like a whole worker engagement kind of solution where it really enables a lot of the communication all the way down through the supply chain. And they really did like a whole study, like based on, to kind of say that there's a data-based proposition where supporting workers and artisans is really good business. And I think that's kind of where it ties into on like the innovation front. But yeah, thanks.
Amazing. Thank you so much, panelists. So we have one more question, but because I know it's quite late in Sri Lanka and India, I will allow Ranil and Karan to probably go to bed soon. But before they do that, I just wanted to let everyone know that our next webinar, which will be on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the fashion space, and boy, is that a juicy topic. That one will be on Thursday, December 3rd at the same time, 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 4 p.m. Universal Time coordinated. You can put in your calendars. You can sign up for our newsletter on our website to register for that. We'll also be hiring for our next social media communications coordinator and also various country coordinators. The job description is coming out on Friday. So if you're interested, you can sign up at the link here to be notified. And we're also continuously profiling different ethical brands all around the world. So if you want to be featured or you know someone that would like to be featured, you can email Fernanda at threadingchange@gmail.com. And if you want to stay in touch with us about speaking opportunities, collaboration, being featured, research policy, anything like that, you can reach us at hello@threadingchange.org or my personal email or Fernanda's email. And our social media handles are Threading Change on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and also LinkedIn. And with that, we'd like to thank all of you for coming. Big thank you to all of our panelists for their amazing insights and their amazing knowledge. This was a great, fantastic discussion, and we cannot wait to hear more from all of them in the future. Yeah, so if you would like to stay on for the optional Q&A period, please stay on. If not, feel free to drop off, and we'll see you at our next webinar on December 3rd. Thanks so much.